Hello. Today I'm partially sacrificing this accordion to make a character from a game that I don't think I'll ever play. All in the name of hopefully riding the algorithmic wave of the game Baldurs Gate quite timely release date. So stick around. Just like in life, it's important to have a good foundation to build on. It doesn't matter if you're looking to improve yourself or if you're sculpting a video game character, a good foundation is always the answer. When the aluminum foil were in place, then it was time to start to add some clay. For those that haven't already figured it out, today we're making a Mind Flayer from the game Baldurs Gate. And I'm gonna be honest, I would be lying if I said that I knew what a Mind Flayer was a year ago, because I didn't. But I did some reading and some researching on the interwebs, and this is what I learned about the Mind Flayer. Number 1. They're basically squid wizards from the Dungeons & Dragons universe. Number 2. They eat brains, and why wouldn't they? I'm quite sure that brains are very nutritious. And by learning those things, I already felt much more confident about this project. When it came to the overall look of our Mind Flayer, that I'm gonna refer to as Bert from now on, I was influenced by the official Baldurs Gate 3 trailer. In that trailer, we're introduced to a Mind Flayer that wears a very sinister looking red armor with a strange looking silver pattern on it. And even though that armor was my inspirational starting point, I knew that I didn't want to make Bert's armor quite as outlandish and over the top, because I'm from Sweden, and things that are outlandish and over the top scare Swedish people. However, one thing that I knew for certain that I wanted to keep from the trailer was the alien-looking indent pattern on the armor. So I basically just poked some holes into the clay and called it good. You know, it doesn't have to be more complicated than that. Don't overcomplicate your life. Even though I had spent quite a lot of time poking tiny lines on Bert's torso, I wasn't quite happy with the way it turned out. So I decided to just try again. You know, there's nothing more to it than that. I wanted to make an armor that had more of an organic flow to it, something that felt a bit more tailor-made to the body. It doesn't matter if you're a warrior or a wizard, everybody needs shoulder pads. I'm certain that Gandalf's encounter with the Balrog would have ended quite differently if he only would have had some nice shoulder pads. And speaking of shoulder pads, I gave Bert some shoulder pads that had quite a resemblance of the band Kiss lead guitar player Ace Frehley's 1979 Dynasty era outfit. You know, it's the album with the song I Was Made for Loving You. It's quite the banger. Just like the armor parts on the hips, the seemingly random poke pattern was added here as well. That way, the overall look would start to feel a bit more cohesive. As I previously said, everything becomes better with shoulder pads, so even the shoulder pads got shoulder pads. The arms were looking a bit too flat, so I gave them some additional details by sculpting some lines here and there. And when that was done, then it was time to give Bert a head. But first, a musical interlude. The head started out like they usually do, just a round ball, but this time I added a slight cone shape to the top of the head. And even though I was making an octopus of some sort, the humanoid features would still be quite prevalent in the face. For the better half of this process, I kept one eye on the reference photos and the other on what I was actually sculpting, like these eyelids, for example. As if it wasn't gross enough that the Mind Flayers eat brain for breakfast, lunch and dinner, it also looks like their brain is poking out a bit from the sides of their head.
Nasty.
When the top half of the face was complete, then it was time to focus on the mouth area. So I rolled out 4 small clay snakes that would serve as tentacles on the bottom half of Bert's face. I attached them in 2 rows of 2, and then the moment of truth, adding the head to the rest of the body. The face was looking a bit too flat, so I added a small piece of clay to bulk up the nose area. I was quite happy about the way the head turned out. The only thing I disliked about it was the fact that it turned out a little bit too small. But hey, that's life. The Mind Flayers in the reference photos that I'd been looking at only had 3 fingers and 1 thumb. And I can assure you that no one is happier about that than me, because every less finger and thumb that I have to sculpt, the better. When the hands were in place, then I covered up the seam between the hands and the wrist with a small piece of clay. But it still felt like there was something missing, so I decided to give Bert 2 wrist guards, one on each side with the same pokey pattern that the rest of the armor had. Sometimes we're faced with difficult questions, like, is a wizard if a wizard doesn't have a wizard's cloak? My guess is no, and since Bert is a squid wizard, of course I couldn't pass on the opportunity to give him one. And when the cloak had been safely secured on the back, then I gently reshaped the tips of the tentacles. The sculpting process was done, and it was time for Bert to head into the oven for 30 minutes. Next up, a base. I wasn't entirely sure what kind of base I was gonna make. I had a couple of ideas, but settled on making an elevated rocky platform that Bert could stand on and look like he's about to fling spells like it's nobody's business. I removed a good amount of excess foam around the sides of the square to make it look a bit more like rock. I also cut away thin strips of foam along the edges of the base to give the sides a bit more character. The base was looking a bit too empty, but the leftover foam pieces were just what I needed, so I glued them onto the base to make it look like there's some scattered rocks lying here and there. And then the final thing to add before the base was completed was some hobby sand, which I applied by using some PVA glue. Then the base was done, and it was time to paint. I started out by painting Bert with a black base coat, with the exception on his head and hands. Then the triangular parts of his dress, as well as his arms, got painted with a dark blue, followed by some lighter highlights. Nothing crazy, but just something to make it stick out a little bit more. The remaining part of the dress got some purple highlights on the most elevated areas of the folds. I tried my best to smooth out the transitions between the black and the purple, and it turned out okay. The head got a purple base coat, followed by a crazy amount of highlights applied on smaller and smaller areas of the head. Since the face is usually one of the most important parts of a sculpture and the first thing that people look at when they see it, the majority of the time painting got spent on getting it the way that I wanted it. And I'm happy that I did, because I think the results speak for itself.
Just look at that beautiful face. Look at it.
I wanted the color of the armor to resemble the one that the Mind Flayer have in the trailer, so I painted all of the individual armor parts red and then dry brushed the most elevated parts of the pokey pattern silver. The edges of the shoulder pads and the wrist guards were also painted silver. The breastplate was given some more attention. I painted it with some really thin lines of bright red as well as some silver to give it a worn and distressed look. Then Bert was done and it was time to start paint the base. It's quite rare that I start out by painting rocks grey. I feel like a brown base coat, generally speaking, gives a more natural look, especially when you start adding highlights. And adding highlights is exactly what we're gonna do right now. And I'm also gonna be quiet for a while, so please enjoy this tune. Here we go. When the rocks had been painted, then I applied some PVA glue here and there, because it was time to add some dirt flock. Some smaller patches were spread out at the bottom of the base, and the top got a fully covering layer. Adding flock to bases is perhaps one of the most satisfying things, and it can be hard not to get carried away. But you know what?
I got carried away, alright. I kept adding that damn flock.
So much flock and so little time, am I right? And speaking of satisfying, painting the sides of the base black is kind of like looking at the view from a mountaintop that you've just climbed. You know, just a bit less straining on the body and perhaps mentally taxing. But hey, we're done! Amazing, look at it! I'm gonna show you the final results in just 1 second, but before that, I just want to take the time and say thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you. If you feel like helping this channel grow, please consider subscribing or perhaps giving the video a thumbs up. That would mean a lot to me. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Goodbye.